Hey family, good to see you guys. Thank you guys for joining us. We have our sister, our friend Simone with us. She is an attorney, or is the right proper term, esquire.
Big word.
Yes,
Okay.
yes. She earned them, bro. She earned them. So we're just a pleasure to have you. So we brought Simone on because we specifically want to talk about divorce. She is she's going to get into the details, but she's essentially you're a divorce attorney, correct?
Yes, well, I do general practice, so I do family, criminal, probate, and some other actions as well. Yes.
Yeah, so you knee deep in all people family business.
Yeah.
There's a lot of solving problems, a lot of problem solving.
Right. That's good, man. So, and so my wife and I, we lead a nonprofit called Hope Lives, and so we have a lot of couples who are just stressed out, frustrated with one another, get to the brink of I would say the brink of their relationship, essentially what you would want to call it, and they say, hey, we're done. We don't want to do this anymore. What does it look like to do divorce? Or you have some couples who weaponize the word divorce and they use it against their spouse to get something they want. And so we want Simone to be able to kind of talk to this for a lot of couples, be able to kind of dissect this. So Simone, tell them a little bit about yourself. Tell them, like you just said, what kind of court cases you deal with, and we'll jump on in.
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Simone Holloway. It is so great to be with you guys tonight. I am a lawyer based out here in Greenville, South Carolina, and like I mentioned before, I'm a general practitioner, which means that I do many different types of law. Specifically, we're going to talk about family law, which comprises of divorce, adoption, name changes, and other family or domestic issues. And so I like to say that I'm a lawyer by day, but a storyteller by night, and I write stories of hope and resilience. And so if you see my name pop up and you want to see, oh, she does a lot of different things. Yes, I'm multifaceted, and I love it. And so you can find me on all social media networks under my name, Simone Holloway. And then I also have a YouTube channel because I'm a believer where I dive into line by line teaching faith called The Fine Line, and where we study the Word of God by precept. And so, yeah, I'm all of that. I'm your lawyer, I'm your preacher, I'm your helper, right? And I have a lot of fun together. Exactly. One-stop shop. And so, today I know we're going to discuss about divorce specifically, and I'm going to share with you a little tidbits about the law, and then so you can have more of an educated perspective of what that actually means.
Absolutely. Good news. So just to kind of kick it off for folks, tell folks what does it actually look like to get a divorce? Like, what have you seen in your experience of dealing with divorce? Just kind of walk folks through that a little bit.
Yeah, so a divorce action is basically an action that's in the family court of that state, okay? Now, divorce is the dissolution of a marital union. Legally, you are still married until you are either annulled from that marriage because the marriage was voidable in the beginning, which means it wasn't no good, or until you get a divorce, which means that you and your spouse go before a judge and determine that you can no longer stay married.
Now backtrack a little bit. Explain annul. You define the word annul for folks.
Annulment is basically when you get married to a person, or you think that you're married, but that marriage was no good in the first place. Either you didn't have the mental capacity to get married, or you were intoxicated when you got married. That diminishes that. Or say you married someone who's married to someone else. Bigamous marriages are not actual marriages. I know that you see it on Sister Wives and it's in Utah and everybody want to marry each other, but that's not the case in the state of South Carolina. Or you married someone that is close in relative descent as you. So, weird, but okay. That is not an actual marriage. And for that, you can get that annulled.
Those are big facts.
And so annulment is basically a remedy for a marriage that probably should have never happened in the first place, you know?
Gotcha.
Now, divorce is for if you two consenting adults got married, and you get married by having a license from your state and having it declared marriage by an officiant, a judge, or a religious person to do that. That is the ceremonial marriage. And before South Carolina outlawed common law marriage, you could be married to common law marriage, okay? Those are two different, consenting
And common
adults.
law for most folks is basically just shacking up. That's basically what it. Yeah.
Basically,
That's what the old folk call it. Oh, you just been shacking up. So,
basically,
yeah, you
pulling
done been
yourself
together.
out.
Yeah, you done been
Yeah.
together 25 years. Just ain't no papers on them. Yeah.
No papers, but you're common law married. You hold yourself as married. You take on each other's last names. You're like
Right,
living
right.
together. That's no longer the case here in South Carolina. So if you are in a common law marriage, you are not married. I just want to put that out for you. But yeah, so then you decide, you and your partner, or you or your partner decide, okay, I'm not happy in this marriage and I want to get a divorce. Where do I start? Well, the first thing you can do is you can go to your court, your family court, and you can put what we call a petition, which is a complaint, plus a filing fee, okay? A complaint is basically a document going before the court saying who you are, who the opposing spouse is, where you guys live, whether or not the ground for your divorce. You can't just get divorced because you don't like her, or him.
Right.
That's not a ground for divorce, right?
And
then what
like,
you
like,
want.
For instance, I mean, like, so
Yeah.
a ground for, what are grounds? What are grounds for divorce?
Yeah, sure.
Some
So,
people just be like, you pissed me off today.
yeah, that's not a ground for divorce. In the state of South Carolina, where I am, you have no fault divorce, which is a divorce that's based on 1 year separation. You and your partner have been separated physically separated, not separated in your mind. Physically separated in two different locations for a year. Or for at-fault divorce, there are 4 grounds. There's been adultery, desertion, which means that your partner abandons you, abandons the home, never comes back, just completely leaves. Physical abuse or cruelty, which means that, there's been some type of physical abuse there. Some states are allowing for there to be some type of emotional abuse or mental cruelty. That's not here in South Carolina, but that is an option that's on the table. Or habitual drug and drunkenness. And that is more than a good time. That is a pattern of drinking too much, taking prescription drugs or other illegal narcotics, and to where it affect the union itself. So those are the grounds for divorce. And so that process is you're going to file a petition called a complaint. That is a written document of all that's going on in your marriage, why you guys can't be together, the ground, and then what you want the court to do. Whether or not you want a certain custody agreement, whether you're petitioning the court for alimony or what we call spousal support, if you want the marital home or the division of property. And it's a very nuanced piece of paperwork. We're also going to file what we call a summons, which is telling the opposing party or your soon-to-be ex-spouse that you're filing a petition against them before the court. That's what we call service of process. And once you have those things filed, plus $150 here in South Carolina, plus costs, or wherever you are, then you have to do a bunch of other rules to make sure that the spouse is served correctly, they get notice, and things of that nature so that you're not held in default or contempt.
Now let's back it up a little bit because I want to, because you gave them a lot to chew on. Because some folks nowadays feel like you just go on Google and Google these forms and get this stuff done. When in actuality, you need a real deal Holyfield lawyer to do this. Now, and let's be clear, we're not encouraging divorce.
Right.
What I want you guys to understand is that a lot of the couples who've come to us have just willy-nilly said, hey, and I said willy-nilly, literally have come to us and said, oh, I want a divorce. Well, baby, we've been together 3 years. Oh, well, shoot, you just now hit the hard parts in life. Like, you literally just got out of the honeymoon phase, So, just back it up a little bit. Even before going to the whole idea of divorce and complete paperwork, explain to folks what the types of persons that normally come to you, because I know we had a discussion about this offline, but most folks who come to you don't have that stuff already planned out. Most folks who come to you essentially be like, yo, let's get it done, and y'all in there trying to essentially be the mediator and the lawyer, but you're not paid to be a mediator. So explain that to folks as well too.
Yeah, so a lot of people come in, like you were saying, and they just think that a divorce is this magical exit route that's going to solve all of their problems, right? Okay, I don't want to I don't want to communicate. I don't want to face this. I don't want to, deal with this issue. So I'm going to just leave and exit my marriage. But it's so many more details than that. And so what we get a lot of times are people who haven't even been together. My shortest couple, they were together for 30 days. I said, it was like a Netflix trial. They decided, you know what, I'm going to try like Netflix. And, marriage is great on TV, but I want my money back and I want to get divorced.
30.
But, like I was telling, Andy before, it's easy to get married. It's easy to get married. I can go out and get married tomorrow. I really can, right? With that license and that officiant. But it's hard to get divorced. And it's because our states and our country value the sanctity of marriage, right? And union and all of that together. And so, yeah, it's just, I think a lot of times before, we move into the divorce phase, communication is helpful. Going to see a mediator might be better to kind of decide what type of property you want to divide or where your children will be placed and things of that nature. And then after you do mediation, typically you find that people reconcile and you figure out like, wow, I really don't want to, not live my life. You just need another party to communicate things with.
Yeah, and it skipped up a little bit, but basically you said that people who normally go to mediation eventually get to a reconcilable moment where they say, nah, I'd rather do something else, essentially.
Yeah.
I think that's big, though, because what this is doing, it shows, like my husband was saying, it's easy to throw the word divorce out there, but do you really understand what you're getting yourself into? And it sounds like when these people get up in there, they may come in there because they're mad, but when they really start understanding, like you said, talking about the kids, talking about the home, like, it hits. It's like, whoa, is this really what I want, or am I just in my feelings? So I think it's important, and that's why we're not shying away from talking about divorce, because we know people say it. But I think this segment is to make sure people understand, do you really know what it means and the deepness to what the impact it has? Because like you said, for them to go through that and then realize, okay, this ain't it, that speaks volumes to me.
Absolutely, absolutely. So just to catch folks up, so we're literally going through with our, I was about to say our attorney.
Attorney on what?
Right. Our good friend and attorney, Simone. We're talking about divorce, man, and so she literally just walked us through what some couples might want to do before even going through divorce is look for a mediator. Right. Where do you even find a mediator? Like, what does that even look like?
Well, there's a lot of different options. There typically are mediation centers, and that you can go to, and they will have a price scale depending on your income. So, for example, if you're in the Greenville or upstate area, shout out upstate, whoop, whoop, right? We have Upstate Mediation Center here with my good friend Helen, and they do on a pay scale. And they'll bring an attorney, typically, who act as mediators, or a judge who act as mediators, and they'll schedule a day for two parties to come in with their counsel and talk it out and throw out the issues.
That's real good.
Yeah, that is real good. That's amazing. And so you said it's on a scale. That means like the scale is based on what people make, or it's based on their number of hours, or
it's based on their income and how much they make. So depending on where they fall within, especially around the poverty line, they'll be able to have an appropriate price for them to be able to pay for those services.
Okay.
That's good.
That's real good.
Yeah, in my mind, it sounds like it's almost like a counseling session before you get there, which is what you may need anyway, because then you can get there and realize, okay, we just didn't communicate, So having that mediator there, I think, is a very pivotal point. I think it's why a lot of people go to counseling as well. So that's good to know. I didn't even know that's one of the things, that they can do. So it's cool.
And having done pastoral counseling, I think and I'm going to have a transparent moment here, but I think the bigger thing is that sometimes folks get to counseling and most people are like, by that point, come because they've hit their breaking point and they're mentally shut down, like mentally drained. And so they're at the point where they say, nothing this joker going to say to me is going to make me get out of what I really want to do in the back of my mind, and that's just exit. And then you get up in the courtroom and then that joker starts singing a different song, because now you realize, oh, it's a lot more into this. Like, there is a lot more involved in this. And I think that they completely get to the point where they realize, like my wife was saying, is this reconcilable because I was in my feelings, or, there's really some legitimate issues and I really may need to go back to counseling, or really need to have a real deal Holyfield conversation about what's going on in me. Like, why is it that I'm looking for an exit plan? And so I'm glad you mentioned that. So to go back to what you were saying, was it that they're essentially going through the process, they get a summons done, they have to issue all these do all this paperwork. What happens next? Like, is it just wham bam thank you ma'am, we done? Like, what? I mean,
no, that's just part one of the process. Then what we have is called a temporary hearing, and that's when you appear before the judge. Keyword I use, temporary. It is not final. We're just going to adjust your life for 2 to 3 months until we can get the next appearance to have the final hearing. And within that time, you're going to have mediation, affidavits, preparation of packets for the court, and it's going to be a lot of time and a lot of money. So it's here at this temporary hearing where we find out who gets to stay in a marital home and who has to leave. Who's going to have primary placement of children for child custody? Who's going to have visitation? Because whatever parent's not having primary placement with the child, that parent's having visitation. Will that visitation be unsupervised or supervised? That's a question for the court. Who's going to be responsible?
I'm going to cut you off. Whoever has primary placement, whoever has primary placement controls visitation. Is that essentially what you were saying?
No. So whoever has primary placement, and primary placement is basically the child lives with that parent. So, for example, if I was married, and me and my spouse got divorced, and God forbid, that will never happen. But let's just say, for the example, that did, right? You gotta be careful what you speak to people. For example purposes, right? So, and we decided to get divorced, and we went to a temporary hearing, and I got primary placement. That means that our children will reside with me, and I will be basically responsible for the caretaking and the custody of that child. Okay? However, my soon-to-be ex-spouse would have visitation, which means that they can have either weekend visitation every other weekend, depending on what the court standard issues, or they can, and once a week throughout the week visitation, or where it's unsupervised, which means that there's had to be another person there, another family member, or nobody, or it will be supervised, which means that another member outside of the marital union will have to be present with him for that visitation. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes perfect sense.
Does that also get into then child support and all that stuff too?
Yes.
Okay.
So, primary placement parent does not pay child support because the child is with them. Visiting parent has to pay child support according to the DSS guidelines.
Right, that's what I thought.
And there's a calculator that's available to put in those numbers, as you know all about that. So. Right.
She's only saying that for those who don't know because I work with DSS. That's why she's saying that.
The DSS guidelines. So, and there is a 5% court cost added to that number. Right. So we're seeing how this thing is starting to become a little costly. Before you were in love, you had a family, you had kids, and like, oh, I'll buy a shirt, oh, I'll take it to daycare, oh, it's ballet, I'll get the car. But now it's like, oh, I have a guideline number to pay, and I gotta do this every 2-3 weeks, and garnishments, and it becomes a little bit more.
Yeah.
But
no, you're right, and that's what I was about to say. It becomes a little bit more because at this point, this is, and so what we're telling folks is that, like, this is like the base level, like baseline. Everybody's, I think my camera just went out. That's not good. You said, though, this is the base level of essentially what a divorce process may look like. And I want to put emphasis on that base level because everybody's situation is different. Everybody's
True.
financial situations are different. Everybody's marital family situations are different, and so every state is different as well too. And
Right.
so
Mhm.
this is clearly for the state of South Carolina, and so we'll have people in the community probably from a little bit of everywhere. But this is just kind of like a base level or baseline, so that folks essentially will get a better understanding and a grasping of what it means to say, what does it really mean to get a divorce, or what does this really
Mhm.
look like, or just looking at that per se, versus just weaponizing this term to get something out of people, or um, um, just using it because you're hurt and upset. And
Right.
so, and I know there are some people who are actually considering
Mhm.
divorce, and so I
Mhm.
don't want to diminish that in any way, shape, or form. I know there's some
Mhm.
people who are actually considering it, and so this is one of the reasons why we had Simone come on, because unfortunately, some people end up getting a divorce for various reasons,
Right.
Mhm.
and so just considering all these things keep a good idea for sure.
Yeah. I just like the part when they said mediation because I feel like that's still the counseling aspect of it anyway, you know.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
because, like we said, we're not saying go get a divorce, we're just making sure you understand the whole process. But either way it goes, I think communication is going to be a big key. And if that's what people are lacking, you can't bypass it. I think that's what I like about it. It's not like,
Mhm.
oh, I'm not happy and I'm not going to communicate with you. Let's just go get a divorce. No, you
Yeah,
actually do have to communicate with your partner through the process
Mhm.
of a divorce to actually get a successful one.
that's
So
exactly
I
right.
think that's good to know is that you can't just jump around it. You're gonna have to address your issues head on, whether you stay
Mhm.
together or whether you get a divorce.
Absolutely. And
Mhm.
so Simone, just kind of getting back to it, I was going to ask you essentially what was like as you're going through the process, in your own personal opinion, like what have you seen to be some challenges with couples
Right.
when they
That's
get
good.
to the table?
That's good.
A few things that I've seen to be problematic with couples who are seeking divorces. Number one, they're not really prepared to the gravity of what that means. So typically, couples come and they want a no-fault divorce, but they're not in separate locations. That's
Mm.
the rule. You have to live in a separate and apart for a year. And the court doesn't change their mind because you're not financially secure to fulfill that rule. So that's
Say that
the
one more
first
again.
thing.
Say
The
that one more again.
court doesn't
Run
change
that
its
back.
mind
No
because the
communication.
parties are not financially secure to sustain that rule. So the first problem, people are not prepared. So they come and they want a divorce, but they haven't fulfilled the rule, right? Or they don't have any other grounds or of the other fault grounds. The second thing that I see that's super problematic is that people understand that when you get married, all that property is marital property. That
Mm.
is not separate property. It's
Okay.
That's
marital
good.
Okay.
property, which means
That's
that it's
good.
going to get equally divided by the court. So it doesn't matter how long you've been married, or that you hate that she gets this house, or that she
Right.
didn't pay this, or he didn't do that.
Boy,
It's
listen.
That's
marital
real. And I
property.
think that's real, and I think this is such a good thing because you need to hear this before even going into marriage. Like I
Come
think
on,
Mm-hmm.
bro.
hearing you talk, Simone, is
Mm-hmm.
letting
Come
me
on,
feel like
bro.
this is something that people thinking about getting married need
Come
to think about
on,
this because this is
bro.
real. Because when you said that, I thought of so what if Sally Sue went to a marriage with Johnny and Sally Sue didn't own anything. She had nothing in
Mm-hmm.
her name, but Johnny over here got bukus. He stacked. He got houses. He got bank. When
Mm-hmm.
Sally married Johnny, everything that was Johnny now becomes Sally. So if they get a
Mm-hmm.
divorce, Sally now has a right to Johnny's stuff, right? Even if they
Yeah.
came into the marriage with nothing. Like I think that's big.
Yeah, she has a right to his assets,
That's
and
huge.
she also has a right to his
Oh,
debt. So that debt will be
There we
equally
go.
separated between the
There you
two
go.
parties. People think, oh, don't marry
That ain't
oh,
people
that
who
ain't
have a lot of debt
that's,
because you inherit that debt
bro.
upon you when you get married. And
I'm
so
so
there
happy
are,
whenever y'all get married.
um, there are personal and separate things like, once you come into the divorce proceeding, in your temporary hearing, it'll say all separate and personal property will remain with those parties. That's like your car and your clothing. And if you open a credit card, that's on you. You can't liquidate that now to be on your spouse. But I think people don't really
Even if
prepare.
they're, I'm sorry, I mean interrupt you. I
Mm-hmm.
should wait,
Yeah.
but even if they're a authorized user on the card, so say both of them on the card together,
Mm-hmm.
they can't like if one is the primary, one is the secondary, they can't liquidate that to be separate debt. It's just whoever's the primary on it.
Yeah, you can't liquidate anything until after the ending of the divorce proceeding. It's kind of like being in a game, in a match. And you can't switch referees in the middle of the game because you're mad that the referee is putting all these plays. Like, no, you have to wait to the end of the game before you switch the referees. And it's the same way. You can't liquidate your assets to try to avoid having to pay your soon-to-be ex-spouse. So that's the second thing. I think people don't understand what it means once you get married. They don't understand the gravity of marriage. And because they don't understand the gravity of marriage, they don't understand the cost of divorce, right? And so that's why I tell people, do not get married for love. I know that's very anti. Y'all like, oh, she's a believer? Oh, she's a Christian?
Listen, I'm looking for the offering plate, yeah?
No, she loves God? Why would she say that? Like, it has to be a little bit more than love, because if push comes to shove and you're not out of love with your spouse and you're going through a proceeding, love is not going to pay for the divine division of cost between the two assets. It's not. So, yeah, I'm a little radical. I believe in prenuptial agreements and all that, but that's not why we're here.
But that is a great point, though, because a lot of people feel some type of way about prenups, and because what you just said, let's talk about it just a little bit. Once again, like I said, this is not legal advice for your personal situation, but this is in general. But let me say this. So there is a very bent idea towards prenups. Some folks feel that if you have to get a prenup, then you shouldn't be married in the first place. That's one perspective. Another perspective is that the love isn't strong enough if you have to get a prenup, or excuse me, not the love, but the trust isn't strong enough if you have to get a prenup. And so, make a long story short, why do people get prenups? Because I think the biggest flaw is that all people know about prenups is what they've seen from, millionaires, or like even the Dr. Dre situation, with everything he's got going on. People have seen, oh shoot, homeboy didn't have a prenup, she getting $400 million and all this stuff, and so they felt like, I know a lot of people said that was the reason why he went into an aneurysm, but that's another story. But just talk a little bit about prenups.
Yeah, so a prenuptial agreement is an agreement or a contract that you would have before you get married, and it's basically saying, just in case our marriage ends, how are our assets going to be divided? Am I going to be able to have the equal spousal share that the state may provide, or am I only going to be able to have this allotted amount? And a lot of people say you only get what you came up with or in with the marriage with. You'll get, 10%, 20%, whatever the parties agree. As long as you're not coerced into a prenup or threatened or is not under duress or anything of that, or fraud, and you willfully come into that agreement, then the court will uphold that prenuptial agreement. I say it like this. This is just me. If you had, before you got married, say that you were out here balling, shot calling, or whatever, and you're a CEO of a company, right? And you've been building, you've been grinding, you have all these assets, you have, 6 figures and all of this, right? And it's something that you have worked hard to build. Why would you not protect that? We protect everything else. We have insurance for our bodies. That's health insurance. We have insurance for our cars. That's auto insurance. Why would you not have insurance for your union? That's a prenuptial agreement. Now, that doesn't fit into the whole, God and love and trust, and that's awesome. However, as for me and my house, because of my work, man of God will be signing to have a prenuptial agreement.
Okay, come on. I get both ways, like thinking at it, because I'm even thinking of from perspective where I get it. You can be like, oh man, you don't trust me, I don't want to sign no prenup. You should trust me. But then it can also be a sense of, okay, I don't want to sign this, but I know that I'm going to be with you. So if this is what you want me to sign, I'll sign it. But in my mind, I don't see divorce anyway. So, I mean, I get both sides of it, because I get how it can be offensive, but I also get it how if you're strong enough in your marriage and your love, and okay, this is just paperwork, but this does not dictate my heart. And my heart is saying, like you said, it's not just love, it's a commitment that I'm making to you. Then if this is the road we take, then we take it, but I'm not going to allow it to, make me feel like, oh, you don't trust me. So I mean,
Of course.
it's difficult, man. Now I ain't gonna lie. If he would have came to me with a prenup, I'd be like, bruh.
Deal breaker.
I didn't say it was a deal breaker. We just would have had to have a little bit more communication so I can have true understanding. And I mean, it ain't like I'm no pole, I'm legit.
Very true. But let me say this though, and so to that point, that's the reason why I mentioned it was because a lot of folks, if you say, oh, even if you, let's just go with me for a little bit. You're on a date and, you've been dating for about a year or and a half or so, and someone says to you, yo, tell me a little bit how you feel, tell me how you feel about prenups or whatever. In a woman's mind, typically, they checked out, bro. It's a wrap.
It sounds like, oh, you don't trust me. So I get it. The first, it's offensive hearing it first time. It's like, oh, you don't trust me. So it is. I get both ways,
I can see that. I think as someone who's in the field, and I have seen 70% of our couples are Christian that are divorcing, it tells me that even faith alone is not. It takes commitment. It takes a decision.
Right.
That your belief in God by itself without discipline does not produce a healthy marriage. It takes both your belief and discipline.
Walk slow.
And so it's, as someone who's in the field, and I've seen people who love Jesus just decide not to do this anymore, I say, hey, make sure that you are protecting yourself and your family, and that legally you're doing everything that is necessary. I know a lot of my sisters don't agree with me. A lot of my brothers don't agree with me. However, I have a bar card and you don't. So it's like... House,
No, I get it. You make a perfect sense. But that's what we're trying to do, right? So with these conversations, give different sides that people can value and appreciate because it was brought to them in a loving way, versus the previous ideas of, not even just being in the South. I think across the country in certain areas, people are against prenups unless you're above a certain tax bracket. And it's just probably a part of your family if you're part of the Walmart family or, some of these other families.
You ain't getting to the engagement.
No, listen, so with that being said, just bringing a different perspective for some folks who are in the, lower tax brackets who think a different, way, who essentially say, nah, I don't really want to do that because of trust issues or because of just whatever the case may be. So our sole goal with this is to bring a different bring a different light to some thoughts that weren't really brought before for a lot of people. And so we thank you for sharing that. That's good on the prenup piece. So we went over challenges for some couples when they get to the table. When they're literally done, it's wham bam, thank you, man, we good, we out of here. What is your perspective on that? Have you seen people to be like, whew, thank God that's over? Or have you seen it to be like, bro, did we just do this?
And I would also ask that. How long does it actually take? Like, a good time frame, with that? Because I know it ain't like, boom, we done. What is like a typical estimate?
Good question.
The timeline for our proceeding is going to take some time. It could take up to 3 to 6 months. Sometimes it could take up to a year, depending on how the issues are contested. And contested means that the parties are fighting with each other about specific issues. So depending on how many issues are contested, depending on how many children are involved, depending on how much property is at stake, each timeline is going to be different for each person. The shortest I've seen, because of COVID, our firm got a couple. This is not funny. I should not be laughing, but our firm got a couple divorced in 7 days. They were literally got their paperwork filed through, and within 7 days they were divorced. But they were separated for a year. So this is a year, and the date they decided to file in 7 days. So people are like, oh, so no, they were separated for a year, and then they had that divorce. I've seen two.
They had all their stuff. Yeah.
They had all their stuff, and they didn't have no property. They didn't have any children together, so they didn't have the contested issues that would keep someone in the court system a little bit longer. But I've seen different reactions. I've seen people who were a part of really, really taxing and emotionally or physically abusive marriages. Divorce was their saving grace. So it was something to
Yeah.
celebrate,
Yeah.
something to kind of move past. It was a fresh start for them, and they were filled with joy once
Right.
they got their divorce decree because their marriage was just a terrible, terrible union. I've seen the opposite.
Yeah.
I've seen people who have gotten divorced and they thought that they were going to find some joy or glimmer from not being a part of their spouse's life, and they were just torn up in shambles because it didn't provide the satisfaction that they thought that the divorce was going to provide for them. So I've seen, the
That's
opposites
heartbreaking to hear,
of both.
man.
Of heart is very heartbreaking for those couples for those particular reasons. Typically, I see more heartbreak with divorces that are for I wouldn't say they're minute things, but what we call irreconcilable differences versus for like
Hmm.
the major fault ground divorces like habitual drunkenness and adultery, things of that nature, because the spouse is relieved because they said, hey, at least I know that I'm making the right choice because this person did this in our marriage. They have some
Yeah.
type of thing
Yeah.
to say, oh, they harmed me in this way, or I suffered injury, so I know that this is the best decision for me and I can have a fresh start. Whereas when you have no fault divorces, it's as if you never get closure because there's no fault. So it's like, oh, I
Mm,
did this and I got through, but
that's
I
crazy.
still miss this
Yeah.
person because they weren't bad. They just didn't fulfill me in this way or whatever in that way. And you bring that into these next relationships, and before you know it, you're like continuing the same type of cycle.
Mm.
Man, that listen, we could
Yeah.
go all night on that,
Right.
bro.
Yeah.
Like, let me
We
just
could keep
say
getting
this.
if you.
Yes, let me just say this. Oof. So yeah, let's just start here. Regardless of whether you're on the path of feeling as if though you're headed to divorce, or you're
Mhm.
in one, or just
Mhm.
finishing one, clearly there's going to be a reflection process that needs to happen.
Right.
Whether you decide to do it on the front end, the middle,
Mhm.
or the end, there's going to need to be a reflection process that takes place to say, okay, what got me to this point? Why did I think this was okay? And in addition to
Mhm.
that, how am I processing what just happened?
Right.
Because here's
Mhm.
the other thing: I've met some couples, met individuals who gone through divorces, and after the divorce, they're like you said, hey, man, like I'm so heartbroken. Not because I may have not missed the person, or maybe
Mhm.
they missed the person, but more importantly, it's like I went through this, and now that I'm on the other side of it, I'm still having some voids in my life that I can't
Mhm.
blame my partner for. I have to
Mhm.
look at in within me and say, okay, like what's wrong with when I say what's wrong, excuse me, but what is it that I'm
Mhm.
dealing with
Right.
that
Right.
is making me feel incomplete? And
Mhm.
so that is a tough pill to swallow. That's a tough road to go down. And I always recommend don't go down that road by yourself. You know,
Right.
clearly you want to talk with people and talk that out. But
And
I'm
I think
glad you
that's
mentioned that.
important because then you don't want to become, oh, this is my third husband, this is my third wife, or this is my third.
Mhm.
You know what I'm saying? Because
Mhm.
now, like you said, you hit a target, Simone, where if you don't take that time to reflect, you can always feel like you're the victim, and everything else was everyone else's fault. Not
Yeah,
realizing what they say when you
Mhm.
point one finger, you got four fingers pointing back at you. So it's important to take that reflection time because you don't want to continue to go down the cycle where you're not realizing that you're the common denominator that's causing the divorces. So I think that's a big thing
Mhm.
as well, like really
absolutely.
having that critical self reflection because it's not always them. Sometimes it's both of y'all, sometimes it's one of y'all. But and I think
Mhm.
too, we've said it before, we both play a part. Like right when it
Yeah,
comes to
Mhm.
marriage, anytime divorce is on the table, you both
Mhm.
have to acknowledge that you've played some part, even if
absolutely.
it was an adultery on the husband's side or the wife's side.
Mhm.
How did you get there? And I'm not going to linger on
Mhm.
that because I know that's a whole nother talk anyway. But it does take reflection because it does, in some way, shape, or form, both of you guys had a part on that. Whether you want to admit it or not, it's a different story. But if you really take time to self reflect, you'll probably be amazed at what you find.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Simone, we getting ready to wrap it up. Tell
Yeah.
us like some pointers, some last minute thoughts you may have
Yeah.
around The other thing, and
Mhm.
we're not gonna get into this now, but I do want to let folks know you do adoptions, right? You do
Yeah.
adoptions as well.
Yes, we do
Yeah,
adoption.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Sweet.
Mhm.
Yeah, so that's
That's probably awesome.
yeah, that's a big part of our life. We
Yes.
adopted all four of our kids, so
Mhm.
but
Mhm.
that's a good thing. I know folks, are looking to do that nowadays. So, but yeah, tell us like some tips, pointers, or last minute thoughts you may have about marriage, divorce,
Yeah.
and what this looks like in today's society.
2021.
Yeah, sure
Yeah,
thing.
because even off of the pandemic,
Right.
there's, the people have really considered it, flirted with the idea big time. Although
Yes.
in 2019
Yes.
and before they said the divorce rates were going lower.
Yes.
So, let's
Hey.
talk about it though. But yeah.
Yeah, the pandemic actually opened the floodgates for people wanting to end their marriage because they realized they don't like the people they married. And I think that, I mean, I know that that's, comical, but I think that the epidemic of the church is that we push people to be married and we shun divorce, and we should just push people to be single and learn themselves and deal with themselves and go to therapy and heal and then come with their purpose partner, because then they'll stay together longer. And what I'm finding out is that it's better to be with someone you like than to be with someone who feels your loneliness. It is. It's better to be with someone you like. It's better to be
You said that before.
with your best friend. But it's better to be with the person who's gonna hold you down, that like their homie, than it is to be with someone who's just fulfilling, your childhood issues and your parental voids, and someone to put on your notch on social media and to validate and to be goals. Because at the end of the day, when you're stuck in a house because you can't leave for curfew, you want to be with someone you like to live your life with,
So real.
Bro, that was good. You
Mhm.
preaching big
Yeah.
time. Hit them with your socials one more time, man. Let them know
Yeah.
where you are, where they can find
Yeah.
you. I know you do a Bible study. Let them know.
Yeah. So on all of my social media, I am Simone Holloway. On Instagram, I am Simone.Holloway8. And you can even find me on Clubhouse. I know, it's amazing. At
Oh, dope.
SRHolloway8. Cool. I am, my YouTube channel is called The Fine Line, where we are connecting God to real life, and we break down the Word of God precept by precept, statute by statute. And so, yeah, I am a lot of fun, and I know you are too. So let's connect. Just hit me up. You can even slide into my DMs. I will totally reply to you. And I just look forward to connecting with you guys. Thank you guys so much.